How's everybody doing today? It's a nice, hot, muggy Thursday in Arkansas here. And I thought that my lunchtime here, I thought that maybe I should do a video kind of covering some things a lot of people have asked about recently. And that's kind of the history of how I got started in mini trucking, fabricating. And I guess most importantly, a lot of people want to know like how the airbag started and how that came about. And so I kind of wanted to go over a little bit of history of that and how it started, kind of how it's evolved into what it is today. And behind me, I have a whole bunch of magazines laid out. These are all magazines that I either built or was a part of building for the covers of these vehicles, or there's a specific tech article in there that I did back in the day. Unfortunately, I'm missing about probably like 30 plus magazines of tech articles that I did over the years that I don't have. So I'm still kind of looking to re-get all those and kind of maybe, I used to have them all framed hanging on a wall, and anyway, over the years they kind of got messed up and destroyed and gone. So I kind of want to redo that just so I kind of have all that that history kind of laid out. So it's kind of cool. But pretty much that's what we're going to do. So hopefully it's interesting enough for you. You can stick around, check it out, listen to what, like how it happened for me, and kind of see if that's how you remember it, or, maybe you came along later after it was already happening. But kind of back when all this happened, there was no social media, obviously, or cell phones or any of that stuff. So it was all done through mini trucking and trucking magazines. And everything kind of went through there. So kind of how it started is that for me, even I'll grab this magazine, which I have nothing in this magazine I did. This is the very first mini trucking magazine ever right here. And I remember, I was really into mini trucks and all this stuff. And then when this came out, 'cause they had trucking at the time. I had a truck that was in trucking, a Mazda truck, but it was in trucking. It wasn't on the cover, because they wouldn't put a mini truck on the cover back then. It only happened one time ever, I believe. And anyway, so this came out, and I just remember seeing things like this. He was down in San Diego. Robert, he had this, we became good friends. He had this cool Samurai, and I remember the paint job kind of blew me away. It was so ahead of its time. And, there was a lot of cool things like that came out. And, I used to see them all the time back in the day. So I just, it really got me interested, and it just became, actually it was bi-monthly then, but it just became a thing that whenever the date came for the magazines to come out, you were raced to every grocery store you could to try to make sure you got the magazine as soon as it came out. It was so exciting, and you just couldn't wait to see what was in there, and it was the best thing ever. So I was hooked big time back then. But I'll start back from the beginning, kind of how I started. I started with cars, actually. I didn't have a truck. I was a poor kid, 16, trying to just get a car to drive. I ended up with a Datsun 510, a 1970 Datsun 510 four-door. And my mom's boyfriend at the time, his friend had one. And it was actually kind of funny because it had factory rally stripes with factory mag wheels on it. And it was a four-door, and it was a red. And anyway, it was actually a pretty nice car. And I just remember it was a four-door, and I was so bummed, but that's all I could afford. It was $500. Took everything I had to get it, but it ran and drove great. Everything was in decent condition. It was a pretty nice car. But that's what I started with, Datsun 510. So I got really heavy into 510s. And where I grew up in Escondido, California, there was a street called Valley Parkway. And people from all over Southern California would drive there on Friday nights to cruise up and down Valley Parkway. And so I was so excited to have a car to drive out there, because I remember always seeing them, all the Two Hip guys, and all the Sunset, all those kind of people back in the day. They'd be cruising up and down Valley Parkway, and there's cool trucks and lifted trucks, lower trucks, everything. And I was just so happy to have something. I remember the first weekend, me and my friend went and took it apart and cut the springs in it to lower it, because we didn't know anything about it. I didn't even know how to work on cars, really, just auto shop. So kind of that's went and did that, and remember bouncing around, like cut the springs too much, but it was low and it was bouncing around. I was so excited, and people were checking it out, and it was, from then on, I was literally hooked on the whole scene of that. So it started for me with mini cars, Datsun 510s. I had quite a few of them. Got some really nice ones that I had ended up fixing up, and I just kind of got into fixing up the cars, fixing them up. And all my friends that we hung around with, some had trucks, some had cars, but it was all about what we could do to it and then go cruising on Friday night. So that's kind of how it started for me. I evolved from that. I wanted to get rid of the 510s. The police would harass me like crazy. They'd literally wait at the bottom of my street, so when I'd leave, they could pull me over and give me too low tickets. It was a big thing back in the day there. So for some reason, they didn't seem to mess with the trucks as much. So I just remember going, you know what? I want to get a truck. I kind of started liking the way the trucks look. So one of my friends had a Datsun 620. They had cut the roof off, made it a convertible. Didn't work so well, like obviously with the rain and all that. So they kind of welded the roof back on, kind of half-assed, but it was lowered. It just had a neat look to it. It was all primered, and it was kind of beat up, obviously, but it was a neat looking truck. I just loved how it looked. So I ended up selling my 510 and buying that truck, and then I learned how to do some body work on it, and the roof was too messed up to fix, so I actually cut out a T-top on it and then just put pinch molding around it. You know, that's kind of what we did back then. You know, I didn't know how to fabricate or anything, so made this cool little T-top, did the body work the best I could, took it to Earl Scheib, and it had center lines on it, polished center lines, and with the holes on them, and took it to Earl Scheib and got it painted like a gunmetal gray. And I made these little plexiglass pieces to fit in the holes that I cut out for the T-tops, and away I went. And there it was. That was my first mini truck, and I just loved it. I drove it everywhere. Drove it to Bakersfield. My brother lived in Bakersfield, drove it up there, and they have a big cruise up there called at Hart Park where people on the weekends would cruise. It was insane. And also they had a main cruise on Chester Avenue back in the day. And me and my buddy, we went, stayed at my brother's for, you know, whatever, a weekend, whatever. Anyway, so we went to Chester to go cruising, and we just saw all kinds of mini trucks and stuff, like next level stuff that we had never seen, like super low, and just some really cool trucks, and it was awesome. So I felt like, you know, we're part of this now. I got a mini truck. There's all these other trucks. A lot of them were older, but there were some new trucks. Like I remember I saw the Alpha Sonic truck. It was a 720, Nissan 720 in 1985, and had Porsche alloys and Maxima headlights and a shell, 2 rag tops, ginormous stereo, and I was just like blown away. I was like, how could somebody afford this? It was the nicest mini truck I'd ever seen. And so that's how we kind of got started. I was just doing that and cruising around, and we used to go to El Cajon to 2nd Street and go cruising down there, and just kind of slowly evolved. That truck I ended up, I wanted my friend Dan Gillen, who I've built a couple trucks. If you guys let's see, I'll see if I can find his truck real quick. Where's it at? Dan's truck right here. So this is Dan's most recent truck that he had. He sold it now, but that was his truck I built for him, you know, helped build. And then his other truck, which is in here someplace. Let me see if I can find it real quick and kind of show it to you. I got some of these things marked out, but trying to think of which one it is. I think it's in this one right here. Let's see. Nope, not that one. I'm not exactly sure which one it was in. Anyway, he had oh my goodness, the Taco Supreme, 2-low Taco Supreme. He had that truck. Here it is. So his truck was actually his first truck that I built for him. Was this truck right here? Okay, 2-low Taco, and I'm sure you guys have seen it around. It was a super nice truck. Brent from Graphic Disorder bought it from him, and he actually redid the whole truck. And anyway, so that's kind of where that truck ended up. But to get back to where I was going, Dan used to have a 1980, 79, 80 Toyota truck lowered on Centro wheels. They were like a flat wheel with these little slits in them. And it was tan and it had magenta graphics, had a chrome roll cage in it, a full bed kit, like chrome air cleaner, like, you know, the old school seat with the little flip down, you know, like armrest. And I used to see him driving that thing around, and I was like, oh my God, that's like, that truck is so amazing. Like, just, you know, the pink graphics on that at the time, I thought it was the best truck ever. And then I saw he was selling it, so I was gonna buy it from him. So I was trying everything I could to like figure out if I could buy it from him. And then he ended up rear-ending somebody on the freeway and totaling it and crashing it. And my buddy Sal Marchese that had the, I'm using the references so people kind of can associate. This was Sal's truck. So we were best friends forever back in the day, and we just, you know, we kind of hung out all the time. But Sal ended up buying like the roll cage out of it for his little Toyota truck. And anyway, so that truck went bye-bye. So I ended up buying one of those trucks, and I ended up finding one, buying it and lowering it. And I got the same wheels. I think I got those. I don't know if yes, I got those wheels from his truck after it was wrecked. I bought those wheels. So I put those wheels on my truck. And I remember masking off the factory graphics and painting them magenta just because I was like, oh, it would be so cool. And then I ended up chopping the top on it. And I didn't know how to chop the top, and I didn't know how to weld, and I didn't know how to do any of it. So I just kind of started doing that and messing with it in my apartment complex in the carport. I literally cut it off with hacksaws, me and my buddy, and rented a acetylene torch and took all my coat hangers from my house and started welding that thing back together and figuring it out. And at the time I worked at a body shop as a prepper, helper learning. And so I kind of, you know, I was driving it with the roof like all, you know, no windows in it, driving it to work. I didn't live that far away. They would just laugh at me every day. And he gave me some pointers. I worked at a place called Henson & Son Auto Body in Escondido, which was back then it was just, you know, like four of us. And then it turned into be one of the best body shops, you know, down there in the country, pretty much high end. But I was lucky enough to work there and learn all these things, how to do things correctly. And they used to kind of laugh at me, but his dad would always tell me like what you need to do to make that work and, you know, this and that. And it was kind of cool. So I kind of, you know, messed around with that thing for a while. And I ended up not being able to finish the chop on it. I just was like, it was too much for me at the time. I didn't have a welder. I didn't really have a place to do it. So I ended up going and buying another roof off a truck, cut it off, went there. We welded a stock roof back on it, and I put a convertible kit, a Hot Tops convertible kit on it. And I loved it. And it was cool. I could drive around. I'd take the top on and off. And I ended up wanting to get a new truck. I loved the Mazdas. My friend had a new hard body. Good friend of mine, Tony Champagne, back in the day, had this cool hard body. He was into bugs, all this stuff, and he always had the best stuff. And he brought this hard body, and we lowered it and put ground effects on it. And I put a Hot Tops convertible kit on it, and I was helping him do that, and I just fell in love with it. And I liked the Mazda, so I went and bought a Mazda Extra Cab, brand new, and kind of started messing with that thing. You know, lowered it, put the wide wheels on it, the saw blades. That's what was cool back in the day. Kind of did that. It was tan. That was the only one that they had. It was like not the color I wanted, but that's what they had, so that's what I got. And so I just remember going, well, Dan's truck looked good with graphics on it, so maybe I could make mine look good with graphics on it. So I was just working, saving my money, and you know, I didn't know how to do any of that fabrication stuff. So I took it. My buddy, I ended up getting my back window painted, you know, back in the day, and Pete Finland, who, you know, Hot Dog Design, super famous painters, painted a lot of my trucks. Painted this truck. Painted the famous Mitsubishi that nobody can ever find. Robbie K's Mitsubishi, painted that. Painted my Toyota, my Ombre. So not only that, he's painted hundreds of other trucks. Like, he's one of the best painters around. Anyway, he had a shop, and the guy next to it, they did welding. And I'd met a guy named Mike Collins back in the day, and he had Sky Body truck. And a lot of people may or may not know. Let me see if I can I'll find a picture of it. It's on the cover of one of these magazines. Sky Body truck right there. Boom, that's ballistic truck. Sky Body truck right there. That was his truck. When I met him, went to a show. It was lowered. It was white. Had saw blades, or wide wheels, not saw blades, but wide wheels. we became friends. So we started all hanging out, and then the next time I saw him, that thing was lifted. He's like, yeah, these guys next to Pete's shop lifted it for me. So I went over and asked them, hey, I want suicide doors. Could you guys do that? And they're like, yeah, we can do that. And I was like, oh man, that's the coolest thing ever. I remember seeing the truck Suicidal Tendencies at RG Canning truck show back in the day. And I just thought, oh my God, that's the best thing. Like suicide doors, like it was like such a big body modification back then. Like very few people had them. So I ended up having them suicide my doors. And at the same time, I would go in there and they would let me work. So I was like shaving the tailgate. I made the tailgate open sideways. They had a welder and I just started learning. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying, but they suicided the doors. Pete ended up painting all the tan back. I put a Hot Tops ground effects kit on it. Some Renault so the wheels wouldn't stick out no more. Kind of changed the style. Had a snug top shell. And I just remember it was all painted, suicide doors. I put a Target top in it from, Hot Tops. All that stuff all at the same time. So it was really went from being a stock truck to coming out with suicide doors, a Target top, the tailgate opening sideways, shaved, with ground effects with Renaults on it. And I remember thinking, I've hit it big. Like this is the best thing ever. Like these are all the things I've ever seen that I wanted, and now I got it. Went to first truck run. Well, not first truck run with that truck. Went to truck run up in Hesperia. And showed it, got a trophy, and I was like so excited. Like it was just the coolest thing. And so from then on, I just started messing with Mazdas, that truck, and ended up putting graphics on it and interior, and won tons of shows with it. Had a lot of fun with that truck. Then I ended up changing it all, painting it yellow. It got shot for the magazine actually back in the day. Alan Paradise shot it for trucking, but it was inside the magazine. Then it ended up being yellow and graphics all over it. And I redid the suicide doors because they didn't do a good job on them. They just kind of did whatever they thought they knew, but they were all breaking and sagging. And so I had to redo all that. Repainted all. Pete did these cool graphics on it, all the neon styles back then. Put, Ford Escort headlights in it, all Recaro seats, like everything was done. It was really cool. And I went and showed that for a long time. Me and Mike Collins would go to all the shows, and at the same time, we would just show together all the time, RG Canning there. So it was kind of evolving at the time, just kind of more and more. And then I started learning how to do this stuff a little bit on my own. And at that time, I got a job working at Pete's shop, prepping and painting, helping him out. And that's where I learned how to weld. Like we were building a frame for the truck that was on the cover of the magazine back in the day called Neon Nissan. It was a super cool mini truck that had all stuff done to it that, the frame was painted and molded and stuff. Like it was crazy. So we ended up redoing the frame on that. I learned how to weld on that. I learned how to weld. I learned how to use a welder, I should say. So just kind of working there, just, it was around everything that was custom. We were constantly working on custom cars every day. He was painting everybody's windows for everybody's truck clubs. And it just kind of took off, huge. I was just so into it. That's all I could think about. It's all I could do. And so it kind of went from that and evolved into some other stuff. And I ended up selling that truck and getting a full-size two-wheel drive Blazer, and lowered that thing and shaved it all and painted all these graphics on it. And in the meantime, we're still changing Mike Collins' truck, like shaving the whole frame and painting it and making it a convertible, full metal removable top, and all this crazy stuff, and painting it black and lifting it huge on 44s. And we were going to shows. It ended up being like just a fun time back then. We're working on Sal's truck, chopping his little Toyota, making it a Roadster, all kinds of stuff. And around then, I was working out of my house, but around then I moved up to Riverside, started the chop shop. Started that, was up in Riverside, and building a whole bunch of cool stuff up there. And just was not the world's best vibe up there at the time. And so I moved back down to Escondido down there, and just continue working on trucks and cars, and kind of fell into working at a body shop, and kind of fell into, I really didn't have a place to work on stuff that much. So I was just doing it at my house. And I got this little 75, I didn't have a lot of money. So I got a little 75 Toyota Hilux that I did not like. I wanted a Datsun, but I couldn't find one. The Hiluxes, I didn't really like them, but I was looking around, and for $700, I bought this truck right there. Obviously it didn't look like that. I wish it did. But anyway, I bought that truck, Didn't even make it home. Timing chain flew off of it. Didn't even make it home, so I was kind of bummed because I thought I was gonna be able to at least drive it. Had a factory camper shell from the from the dealer on it, and anyway, I started messing around with that. Just started cutting it up, and I think I pretty much started with the motor compartment, shaved it, painted it, got a new motor, built the motor, chromed it, put dual carbs, a header, painted it, everything. Like, just did the whole motor compartment 100% done first, so that I could drive it. And then I said, once I make it drivable, then I'll start cutting it up and doing whatever else I want to do to it. But I need to make this thing drivable, and I want to do the motor compartment like show quality, because I'd never had that before, and I really like going to shows and seeing people's motors all done. So I spent a lot of time doing that motor compartment. So we fully painted the motor compartment, the motor, chromed everything, the carbs, all that, put it all in, got it running, driving, and it was just bone stock and driving. And then I said, okay, cool, now I can drive it back and forth. And then I started cutting it up. I chopped the top first, did the chop, and then I did tech articles. Courtney, obviously you guys probably know Courtney Holloway, or you did, or you know of him. Everybody does. He was working at the magazine at the time, and we did some tech articles on shaving the bed rails and extending the bottom of the bed and molding the back of the bed in and doing all this cool stuff for this truck, because nobody was really doing those trucks. And it was just a lot of modifications on a truck for then, just for that stuff. So it was pretty cool doing all that. I put a 91 Toyota, I think it was maybe a 91, whatever, Toyota front bumper and valance on it, molded it all in, made it all fit. I did all that, and I just kept working on it, shaving the doors. So I ended up having it chopped, shaved, fully all shaved. And I remember taking it to Rezo that year, and it was all primered peach. And I went to Rezo, and it had like saw blades on it, so that was like not saw blades, but like the tri-fins. I'm sorry, tri-fins. And I just remember saying, man, I like it, but I need to paint it. Like, I don't want to wait. I gotta paint it. So there were so many cool vehicles at Rezo that year. There was probably like 2,000 trucks there. It was rainy and kind of nasty, but there was some really nice stuff there. And I just went back, took it apart, and we ended up, painting it. And I went and got the interior done from a little interior shop there. So I did a gray tweed with a peach piping and carpet with the peach around it. And we painted it all, got it all ready to go, done, and literally finished painting it the day before Spring Splash. Put it back together. The interior shop was already doing all the stuff. Got it painted, drove it over there. They put the seats in, the carpet in, and it was done. Like, done enough. Had an interior with a headliner and door panels, just basic, but it was done. Drove it to Spring Splash out there, and I just remember pulling up and go to the car wash, and Brian McCormick drove up, and he was shooting them for trucking at the time, and he pulled up. He's like, oh my God, we got to shoot that for the cover of the magazine this weekend. That is the freaking coolest thing. Like an older Mini that's all done. Like, there isn't any of those anymore. So I was so excited, and we went to the show, and Courtney and him ended up getting a model, and they shot it for the magazine that day. And this is that shoot at Spring Splash that day. The truck wasn't even color sanded or buffed yet. The interior wasn't fully done. The bed was, inside the bed wasn't done, but it had interior, but it wasn't like what it ended up being at the end. It was basic, but I wanted to smooth the dash, and that wasn't done yet. So they said, hey, we'll shoot all the pictures there. You do the dash, get your interior stuff dialed in, because I want to do a stereo. And then when that's done, we'll shoot the interior pictures after. So this is that Spring Splash in 1992, I believe it was, 93. So anyway, so that's where it got shot there, and it was pretty cool. Just to, get your truck shot for the magazine there at the show. There was, in that picture, you can't tell, there was a huge crowd of people around it, and that was the shoot, which was pretty cool. You can see the motor even. It was pretty, for those who haven't seen it or whatever, so. Motor was done. As you see in the interior, the dash is all smooth and shaved. That was at a different car show the next month when I finished all that. And Mike Peters ended up doing the center console and the new door panels, and Precision Power sponsored it, and he did all the stereo in it and stuff. So that was shot later, but anyway, so you can kind of get an idea. Like, that's how all the stereo, Mike Peters did all that stuff. Kind of cool back in then. It was really clean for that little truck. So that's kind of how that, took off there. And even back then, in that same article, that same magazine, which was pretty cool, was a tech article of getting rid of the Mazda mirrors and putting on some little billet mirrors, and that was on Mike Peters' truck actually. So that was pretty cool. So it was exciting to get that magazine out. He literally delivered that magazine the day of my wedding. When he came to shoot my pictures of my wedding, he brought me the first copy of it, so it was really neat. Having my first vehicle on the cover of the magazine, it was pretty awesome, as anybody can imagine that's had that. It was a huge deal. I was getting married that day, so that being that, it was just pretty cool. And so it kind of all evolved from there. You know, after that, I just started cutting up, just doing more and more stuff. I was working on more and more trucks, and just kind of evolved from there. And kind of started doing, I was mainly doing just body work, not suspension stuff. That wasn't my thing. I was just doing body modifications, tons of them for a lot of people. And so what started happening right around that time, a little before that too, is that, you know, these guys were starting to put air shocks on these, and hydraulics. And hydraulics was a big thing, obviously. And then they started putting air shocks on them because, you know, obviously hydraulics take pumps and they leak and blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of stuff. They don't ride very good if not done right. And back then, they really weren't done right, so they didn't ride very good. So what happened is that they started doing air shocks on a lot of stuff. And I kept getting these trucks, people, and I was putting roll pans on them or shaving them or bumpers or tailgate skins or whatever. And they would show up and, you know, they would have air shocks on them. And, they did some tech articles in the magazine, like Stage One and Trendsetter, Sean Mahaney and them. They'd done some articles of doing that, and it just took off. It was huge. Everybody was doing air shocks. So I just happened to have a customer, and he was like, I was doing a walkthrough on his Mazda, and a roll pan, and I did like a custom roll pan, not just a normal one. I did some other custom stuff to it. He's like, man, I want some air shocks, and I want, you know, to notch it and lay it down on the ground. And I'm like, dude, I don't really do that. I mean, I do C notches and stuff, but, you know, and he's like, well, you know, could you do it? And I was like, well, I'm sure I could do it. I've never done it before. So I just, you know, I got to figure it out. So I would look at all the ones that would come to me, and they were all usually like just pretty rough, you know, like they'd stick a piece of 1/2 inch, like 2-inch strap down in the top of where the shock was and welded in. It was pretty rough. And same in the back, they just cut shit out and put a notch and, you know, de-arc the leaf springs or whatever, and just to get it on the ground. And the work was usually pretty rough. And I was like, I could do better than that. Like so I told him, I bet I could do it better, but you're just gonna have to let me learn on your truck. So he's like, go for it. So ended up doing it. He had a Mazda truck. I put air shocks in it, notched the back, walked through all that stuff, got it to lay on the ground, and ended up doing all that. And I just remember when it was all done, like I thought it looked cleaner than the other ones that I had seen. And just the way it was done, it just looked nicer. Well, what happened, he started driving around, cruising down in El Cajon, and people started seeing it, and they thought the same thing, that it looked really clean compared to all the other ones. And the truck was nice. It was black with scallops on it, like a teal scallops, and it just looked nice, had Pathfinders on it. But when you open the hood, it just looked all nice and clean, and all the stuff we did looked good. And so it just kind of took off from there. People started bringing me more and more, like, can you do air shocks on this and on that? So I was like, yeah. So I just started kind of slowly doing suspension work from there. And I, you know, had to learn as I went. But, you know, I was pretty savvy on how things worked. I always knew that if you made it look nice, like you could make it work and look nice. Or a lot of those things, they were just making it work. They didn't care whether it looked nice or not because it was underneath the vehicle, so they didn't really care. I was very anal about making things look nice on the outside, so I wanted to make them look good on the underneath also. So that's kind of where it took off. So I kind of started doing that. And a whole bunch of those started happening. And then just so happened, this was like I would say this was probably like 92 or 3, right around there somewhere. And I was doing those, and I had, my truck was done, and the magazine was not out yet. And so it was sometime late 92, early 93. So I ended up just kind of messing around with those things. And I remember one day I just went to the spring shop. I was getting some leaf springs de-arced, and I went down to we had a place called ENC Spring in Escondido, and they arced a lot of springs and de-arced springs and did all that stuff, right? So I took a set of springs down there to get them de-arced for a truck that I was lowering. And While I was there, he just had a motorhome in the parking lot, just so happened, and there was an airbag laying on the ground, and it was, I'll grab one real quick and kind of show you. So he had an airbag laying on the ground, and that airbag was this size. So this is actually, so a lot of people, you know, they back in the day, it was a Firestone. It was a 224C. So so the diameter of the bag was, you know, like 7-8 inches, whatever it was. I think at the time, I believe that one was, it's the same pretty much as this one. So yeah, so 7-inch bag, and so 7-inch bag, and it was just laying on the ground, and this top plate was bottom plate was completely dented, and it had broke where that pin went in, or the bolt went in, and it was leaking. So it was just sitting on the ground, and I asked him what it was, because I'd never seen one before. I'd seen some towing things, but they were the sleeve bags, you know, we had messed with those, not these. So anyway, I said, what is that? And he goes, oh, it's an airbag. And I said, but what's it go to? And he goes, oh, it goes to the back of the motorhome, and that's what holds it stable and lifts it up when they're towing. And I said, that thing lifts that up? He's like, yeah, this bag right here, one bag right here, this bag will lift 2,600 pounds by itself. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, the one bag, 2,600 pounds. As soon as he said that, I know that how much my truck probably weighs, and I know that air shocks, the biggest problem was trying to get 2 inches, 3 inches of lift out of them was almost impossible, because it took so much air pressure and those little compressors to build up forever to get it high enough to drive it. So as soon as he said that, I was like, wow, that thing will lift a truck off the ground. And he's like, yeah, one of them probably would lift the front right off the ground by itself. And I was like, well, where do you get them at? And he's like, well, there's a place called Max Spring up in San Bernardino. They deliver leaf spring stuff, and they actually sell Firestone stuff like helper bags and all that stuff. So he gave me the information. He's like, you can have that bag. He goes, it leaks. Like, you could air it up, but it's going to leak. You can have it if you want. So he gave me the airbag. I went home, and I called the Max Spring place. And the owner answered and said, we deliver on Tuesdays down to El Cajon, and we go through Escondido, and we can come by your shop. I said, well, my shop's at my house, dude. He's like, okay, well, whatever. And I said, I got this airbag thing, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, all right, well, we'll be down there next Tuesday, and we'll bring some samples of what we have here, and you can look to see what will work. Because I already knew it was too big. And I just said that this one's probably too big. He goes, well, we have other sizes. So he said he would bring them. So I said, all right, cool. So that weekend, I had my truck sitting in the garage. This truck sitting in the garage. And I said, I'm going to see if this will lift that. So I just kind of got it all makeshift with the fitting that he had on there, the little piece of airline, and he had given me a Schrader valve, so he said I could air it up with this Schrader valve thing, and so I made a little thing. I stuck it under the cross member of the truck, and I just aired it up, and it lifted the truck right off the ground, like completely. I was like, what the heck? Like, holy crap! Like, I mean, lifted it right off the ground. So once that happened, I knew that I was going to figure out how to make these work, and that we would never use air shocks again. And this was what I was going to use. And the reason why I knew that is that these are made for actual OEM applications for towing, all that sort of stuff, right? So I was just like, I just knew this one was too big. So I took the front of my truck apart, and I was going to see if I could get it to fit in there. But if you've ever taken apart a Hilux, it's like tiny, and you have to cut everything off just to get even a small bag to fit. So I knew that once I took it apart and put it in there, I knew this was not going to work. So I put it back together. Max Spring came down to my house Tuesday, and he brought me a 2.5C, which a lot of people probably don't even know what that is, but it's a double billow, but it's little. And he brought me that, and then he brought me a 2.55C, which is what most people now use on everything. You know, a 6-inch bag, well, 5-inch, whatever, 5.5, whatever they are. And anyway, so he brought me those, and then he brought me a sleeve bag, which I said, nope, that ain't gonna work. And he was like, well, what are you going to use it for? And I showed him what I wanted to do. And he was like, well, you have to use a bellow bag because they articulate and move. And I said, well, do you think it'll last? Like, I'm worried about it like popping. And he said, dude, this thing will last you 20 years as long as it's not rubbing on metal. And I said, are you sure? He's like, dude, 100%. like if you don't have it rubbing on metal, it'll last 20 years probably. It goes, what'll go bad is it'll dry rot like a tire. So any kind of rubber. So he said, it'll work for sure. He's like, if you can fit it in there, it'll work, you know? So I ended up getting a set of those. Sorry, I had to do a quick pause there. Anyway, so I basically just, you know, said, okay, I'm going to start checking it out, see what I can do with these things. And so he ended up leaving me he left me 2 of the small bags and said, you know, just let me know which ones you want. So I asked, well, how do you air them up? And he goes, oh, well, they have a compressor and this little air gauge. And what it was just a single paddle with a gauge. And that would be to air up the back, you know, when you're towing. That's what they use that for. And then they had a little compressor, Firestone compressor. And that Firestone compressor was way better than that little Monroe compressor that I was using for, you know, air shocks, and like everybody else used too. Teeing them out, running 4 off that poor little compressor. So anyway, he said, just, you know, try this, let me know what you need, and I can bring you whatever you need. So at the time, Jason Pang, who was in our club at the time, he had a 89 Toyota Extra Cab, white one, and it was lowered on air shocks that we had done, and you know, laid on the frame, and it was on air shocks. So I said, hey dude, like, let's try to put this bag in your truck. And he's like, sure, I don't care. So I said, I think that if this works, like, you'll be, you know, it'll lift your truck up higher, you'll be able to drive it better. And he was like, all right, whatever. So I ended up pulling his truck in that next week, and I ended up just start cutting things and placing it. And I used the little bag, the 2.5C, so it was little. And I ended up getting it all made to work and fit, put them both in, drove it up and down the street, came back, and it was rubbing on the side of the the steering stop. If you've had a Toyota A-arm, you know that the steering stop comes up like a point. Well, it was rubbing on that whenever it was moving up and down. I didn't realize they would flex. So I was like, oh crap. So I ended up cutting that off and then just going and driving it again up and down the street, came back, and I put tape on it just to make sure it wasn't gonna hit it, you know, just so I could see if it was hitting it, and it didn't hit it anymore. So I was like, all right, you got to have more clearance than what I gave it. So I went in and kind of redid a few little things and ended up getting it to lay on the ground. And then when we aired it up, it lifted it probably about 4 inches. And that was like a huge improvement over an air shock right away. And I was like, oh man, this thing works. Like, this is crazy. So we drove it around. He drove it home and back, and it didn't have shocks on it, just that. So it was kind of like this. At the time, I didn't realize you had to have shocks on it. I just figured this thing was going to do what you needed to do, but no, it didn't. So he drove it, and it was just, you know, it drove good. It just was like, you know, floated, you know, like anything that you take shocks off of. So he came back, and Rezo was coming up. That's right. Rezo was getting ready to come up. So it was 92, getting ready to be 93. So yeah, so Rezo was coming up, and I'm like, dude, we got to get these things in there and working and take it to Rezo. People will trip out because they're going to open, the hood will be open, and they won't be able to see how it's laying on the ground and lifting up. Because on an air shock, you could see it in the motor compartment. So I ended up, we put a compressor in it, no tank, just a compressor, and those airbags in the front of that truck. And then he drove it, and that was it. Just went for it. And then no shocks. And we went to Rezo, and I remember people looking at it and saying, how are you lifting it up and down? And it just was that little, you know, the little valve to lift it up. And we were showing people, and people were like talking so much shit. Oh my God, that's stupid. That thing is just gonna blow up. It's gonna pop. That's dumb. You should put hydraulics or air shocks on it. And everybody was just talking shit. And I just remember going, like, I was like so butthurt because I was like, it's gonna work. Like, I know it's gonna work. This is made for a vehicle, a car. Like, it's not gonna pop. They thought it was just gonna pop, like blow apart. And so anyway, that's kind of how that started. That was the first truck or anything to get airbags on it. I only did them in the front, but kind of figured out that bag didn't get enough lift just because it was a little too small for that. And so kind of figured that it worked, but it didn't work as good as using a 2.5C does, you know, where it's bigger, you know. So ended up knowing that it would work. And then I told Courtney, listen, dude, like, this, you know, this is going to work, man. And he's like, this is crazy. We need to do a tech article in the magazine on this. People are going to shit. And I was like, man, I go, it's going to work. Like they make all different sizes of these things, you know? And then he drove the truck and he was like, holy crap, I can't believe that it lifts up that much. And so we ended up putting shocks on that truck, and then it just drove like a normal truck. Like it was crazy how good it drove. Like it was like, I was blown away. Way better than with the air shocks and all that, because air shocks made it stiff because it had so much air. These didn't have nearly as much air to lift it. So that's kind of how it started there. You know, just that was the first truck to have airbags in it. And we ended up having a guy that saw it down there in El Cajon where Jason lived, cruising. This kid bought a full-size Chevy, an 89 Chevy extra cab, 17-inch center lines on it, and his mom bought it for him, and he saw that and he wanted it. So he called me and said, I want those airbag things on my truck. And I was like, hey, that's the only one I've ever done, so it's kind of going to be a trial and error. Like I gotta, you know, I've never done that. Like as long as you're good with that. And he's like, yep, I want it. So I called Courtney and said, hey man, I got a guy that wants to do it, and it's a full size. He goes, cool, we can do, because mini trucking was just quarterly at that time, so only 4 a year would come out. And that's why that came out so late. That's what I remember. I was only quarterly. He goes, we'll do it in trucking. We'll do a tech article putting the airbags in. And I go, but man, those leaf springs, like it's gonna ride too crappy. I don't want to use the leaf springs. And he goes, I'll call TCI and get a 4-link, and you can 4-link it and put those bags on the back. So I was like, oh man, that's a great idea. Let's do that. So he called Total Cost Involved, TCI. All this stuff they make is for hot rods. And I said, I want a parallel 4-link. And they're like, well, we don't make them for that truck. And I'm like, well, I don't really care. I'll make it work. So they ended up giving us a 4-link kit. I called up Max Spring and said, this is what I want to do. And they gave me a 2.6C. This is a 2.4C, a 2.6C, because I was worried because it's full size, right? I'm like, this bag, I don't want it to not work. So a 2.6C is bigger than this. It's huge. And so they brought me 4 2.6C bags. And we did a tech article. I figured out how to put those bags in there, get the frame to lay on the ground. I did a 4-link, the little tiny pan hard bar, because I didn't know any different at the time. So when you would lift and lower it all the way up, you know, it would move the rear end over, and the pan hard bar was super short because that's what was made. And anyway, put the airbags on that truck, laid it on the ground. It with just a compressor, one compressor, and 2 of those paddle valves so that you could lift. Well, it was 2 of them, so I had 4, so you could lift all 4 corners, and it took forever to lift it. But those big bags, it didn't take a lot of air pressure. It just took a while for that poor compressor to lift it up because I didn't have an air tank, because I didn't know at the time that we should use an air tank. So anyway, did it all. The guy drove it. Truck was bitching. Just took forever. If you laid it out to lift it up, it took forever. So it was kind of like, man, this is kind of sucks, you know, but it worked great. That truck rode so nice and everything worked perfect. And I had to cut a lot of the spring pockets out to make all those bags fit because they were so big, and I had to weld the back of the spring pocket. It was a lot of work to make those bags fit in there, but I didn't know any different. So I'd rather have bigger bags to make sure that it would work. So that's kind of how that started. And we did that truck, and then the tire would rub a little bit when it would go down all the way because it was moving the rear end over so much. So I ended up changing the panhard bar, putting a longer panhard bar on it, and then it solved all the problems for that. And you know, we had cut the bed out so you could see the airbags with the little, you know, 2x4 top cross member over the step notch, and everybody would see that and go, what the heck, what are those? That's stupid, you know, that's dumb. And but that truck drove around. That truck, actually, I saw that truck, I don't know, like 10 years after that, it still was driving around, like, so it was crazy. But bottom line is that it worked. It just sucked of the how long it took to air it up. So I ended up calling Max Spring up. I'm like, man, this compressor burned up a compressor, just too much. Burned it up, got another compressor, and he's like, hey man, like that it needs to have 2 compressors. Like that's too much air, and you need to run an air tank with it so that way the compressors are not running all the time. He goes, it's just like your air compressor at home. It's got a motor and it fills up a tank that keeps the air volume, so that way it goes to that and it's not running the whole time. And I'm like, oh well, how do I do that? And he goes, yeah, they sell little air tanks that go with these kits too. You can buy them. So he brought me a 1-gallon air tank and I mounted it in the motor compartment and hooked it all up, and 2 compressors, and ran it to that, and it would go, the back would go and the front would go, and then it wouldn't move, and then it would take forever because it was 1 gallon of air. And I called him up, I'm like, dude, this still doesn't work right. And he's like, put a bigger air tank. And I said, well, how big can I put? He goes, I don't know. Like, I have no idea. I've never done this before. Like, this is what they use it for. I'm like, oh my God. Like, so I got to figure this out. So I was at Harbor Freight and I just happened to see they had the air tank sitting there, the little handles. You guys probably all remember them. You take that, you fill it up, and you use it to fill your tires up at home. And I was like, it's 5 gallons. I'm like, why can't I just use that? I mean, that's what that is. So bought an air tank, went back, called Max Ring and said, hey man, I got this 5-gallon air tank, but like I need, I got to make sure it's going to air up right and all this stuff. And he goes, oh, you got to have a pressure switch. I'll bring you a pressure switch and you can put a pressure switch on it and it'll shut off and come on by itself, just like your compressor at home. I'm like, oh my God, this is the way to go, right? So I mounted that tank in the next vehicle that we did, which was actually, the next one that I did was actually, I believe it was Rob Fortier's 54 Chevy car, and we did the tech article on that for Rod and Custom, and I believe that may have been the next one that we did, but it was definitely the first car to ever get airbags, for sure. And we put the tank in there. Anyway, so that's what we did. I put 2 compressors, mounted it to the tank, put that in there, put the airbags in it, and it was like, shoot, like lift. I mean, it took a couple seconds and it would lift it up, and I was like, oh my God, like, figured it out. Like, it works. This is the way to go. And then I just remember being able to let it down and lift it up. And it was like, you could let it down and lift it up and let it down and lift it part of the way up. And then the compressor would come on. And I was like, this is the best thing ever. So that's kind of how all that started. Like, just kind of learning, there was nobody to ask. So you just had to figure it out. And I remember we did his car and he was like, because he had never seen it either. He only knew because Courtney and him worked in the same building he worked on Rod and Custom, and Courtney was doing trucking and mini trucking. So he told him, have Brian do it. And then, so kind of that's what happened. He brought me this car and we ended up bagging it and putting dropped uprights in it. And that thing laid on the ground. It was like, what the heck? We had to cut all the tubs out of the bag. It was a freaking nightmare. But at the end of the day, we put airbags in it and it worked and it drove good. So from there, it just kind of started to, people started to see some things, see them. And then, I did another truck and then another truck. And then it just kind of started to take off a little bit. And then the magazine came out with a tech article and people just started calling me left and right, like, hey, I want to do that to my truck. And so it just kind of took off. When that tech article came out, people were like, what? So they would call all the time and ask questions. And I started getting people calling from all over the United States already. I already had people calling about that for like custom body work and stuff, but it was even more so when that happened because everybody wanted their stuff to sit on the ground. And they didn't want to have hydraulics and pumps and batteries and a mess and all that crap. And the airbags rode so good. It just that's kind of where it started, to be honest with you. That's how everything kind of started. It just kind of slowly evolved. And all that was done in my garage at my house. And I airbagged a lot of trucks there before I could get a shop. It was hard to get a shop in our town. That was kind of part of the problem, is that the city was really hard to get a place. So I ended up starting to get so many of these trucks, and then our friends started coming, and then I started doing it for them, and it just kind of started evolving, so that's kind of how the airbag thing started off. And I was actually, it's kind of funny, this truck, oh, not this truck, that's Rob's truck. I want to show you this truck that's, ta-da! Because everything's so popular right now. That's the first C10 ever airbagged right there. Jason Ortiz's truck. That's in front of my house. As you can see, the back is laying on the frame on the ground. The front is not because the crossmember hit the ground. But back then, we bagged this thing and then realized, oh, that thing hangs down. It needs some more modifications to make that work. So, but that was like figuring it out right there. So that we did that. We airbagged this truck in 4 days, start to finish, everything. And, obviously it was pretty simple and, it had basic airlines and all that stuff, but you can kind of see what it was. Like, we put spindles on it and you can see the airbag cups and everything back then. So anyway, so that's kind of cool. I was in the cover of this magazine. That tech article was in this magazine. And what's funny is that truck used to be black, and that was the first body dropped extra cab Chevy truck ever, right there. Boom. Actually, Sal's truck, this one, was the first one, but Sal's was in the middle of his body dropping it, and we had the motor out of it, painting the motor and everything. And the truck was already painted, and we body dropped it after it was painted, by the way. It wasn't body dropped when we first did it, just it had hydros and stuff, and it laid on the ground because it had hydros when he bought it. But we body dropped it when it was painted, so that was real fun. And we had the motor pulled out getting done. And while that was getting done, he brought this truck, and we body dropped this truck and airbagged the front of it. And that truck ended up going to California Truck Jamboree, body dropped, and nobody had ever seen one laid on the ground all the way. So it was like the first body drop truck. So it's kind of funny that those are in the same magazine together. And then that truck ended up getting sold, and that guy right there completely, obviously, redid the whole truck, put hydros in it. Just amazing, like built that truck. I didn't build the truck, we just body dropped it. But they did an amazing job on it, and amazing work, and Cal Concepts, and then painted it, obviously, and just did some amazing stuff. But so that was just kind of funny story. So how that all works. So that was some firsts.